Welcome into another episode of the Draft Podcast presented by the Gem City Sports Podcast Network, your home for serious NFL draft evaluation. I'm Paul Adamczak. Thank you for joining me tonight. The NFL Combine gets underway this week in Indianapolis, which means for the next couple of days, we're going to get a flood of numbers, 40 times, broad jumps, vertical jumps, an entire news cycle built around who won and who lost. But tonight, we're going to get ahead of that. This is the Combine Primer episode, and the goal here is to zig when everyone else is zagging. Tonight, I want to establish what we're actually watching for before any of that data even shows up. What questions matter? What traits can really be clarified this week? And what roles these players are trying to align with as we move a step closer to April 23rd in Pittsburgh. I want to remind you, if you enjoy the show, be sure to follow along on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find me on X at RufusP88. If you'd like a copy of my Combine Big Book, a Scouting Combine Handbook covering all 319 participants, it's totally free. Just DM me the phrase Big Book, and I'll send a PDF copy your way. Did you see that? I'll get that on the screen a little bit bigger. All right, it's pretty cool. I got it's double-sided. There's 12 pages. There's something on all 319 prospects from the quarterbacks through the specialists, and it's pretty cool. Totally free. DM me, Big Book, and I'll send you that your way. All right, let's get into it. Item number one on the agenda for tonight is what the Combine can change. All right, so before anyone runs a 40, before anybody jumps out of the gym in their compression shorts, and before we start doing the annual, this guy ran himself into the first round routine, what I think we need to do is talk about what the Combine is actually for, because this week isn't about boosting draft stock necessarily. It's about eliminating uncertainty, and that's a really important distinction to make, especially for how we're going to talk about these guys over the next few days. So every year the Combine gets treated like it's some sort of talent creation event, like somebody's going to show up in Indianapolis and suddenly become faster, more explosive, or more fluid than they've been on 700 snaps in film in the last 2 years. Unfortunately, though, that's not what this is. You don't become a different player at the Combine. What you can do is answer a question or confirm a suspicion, or in some cases, accidentally tell on yourself. So when I say what the Combine can change, what I'm really asking is, what do we not know yet? So let's say you're a quarterback who wins on timing and rhythm, but whose base gets a little loose when he's pressured. I don't need him to throw 65 yards in tennis shorts. What I need to see is the footwork consistent? Does the platform hold up when he's asked to reset? Does the ball placement suffer when the timing changes? Because if the mechanics are repeatable in a controlled environment like Indianapolis, that tells me the inconsistency on tape might just be situational, not structural. So that uncertainty becomes eliminated. We can extrapolate that. That was quarterbacks. Sort of the same thing with running backs. There are backs in this class who are productive. We've seen efficiency. We've seen tough runners between the tackles, but I don't know if they can all play on third down. So what I'm watching is, do they catch naturally? Can they track the ball cleanly away from their body? Can they step up and identify when the pressure is coming from in pass protection drills? Because a lot of these guys, this isn't a particularly deep running back class outside RB1. These guys aren't trying to prove that they're RB1s. What they're trying to prove is that they're playable, they're draftable. And the Combine, for many of them, can absolutely change that conversation. I'll give you another example. Offensive line is another big one. You can have a tackle who looks comfortable in a vertical set on tape, but we're not sure how he moves laterally. Maybe the scheme protected him. He wasn't asked to redirect very often. So now we get him in Indianapolis, we can ask, how does he mirror? Can he stay square? When he loses early, does he refit his hands or does he open the gate, as they say? It's not, wow, he jumped 9-10 in the broad, that's okay. He can function in space. That's what that's how we extrapolate that from these tests. And now he might be a tackle instead of just a guard. That's a real change, not just draft position, but we're talking dinero in money. Tackles make a lot more money than the interior players. That's a big difference for these guys. And that's just one side of the ball. Defensively, edge is a player, or I should say a position that gets questioned a lot. It's effort. It's bend. Safeties, where the question isn't toughness, we look for range. Corners, where the question isn't speed, it's how they transition when they're stacked vertically. These are movement questions. These are necessarily role questions at the next level. And this is the environment where we can isolate those traits without noise. But here's the flip side to that. There are also players where the combine can't change anything. So like on tape, if you struggle to process in coverage as a linebacker, the shuttle isn't fixing that. If your hand usage as a defensive lineman is underdeveloped, the 10-yard split doesn't suddenly give you a pass rush plan. If you're a wide receiver who can't separate against physical corners, running fast in a straight line doesn't mean you'll separate on 3rd and 6th in November. So as we go through the week and the numbers start flying in, I want you to keep asking yourself one question. Did this answer something we didn't already know? Because if it didn't, then nothing actually changed. And if it did, that's where the combine has real value. And this week, I should say next week rather, after this week, when we're back here for the evaluation show, which will be March 3rd, we'll talk about who answered those questions and who left a couple new ones behind. All right, so item number 2 tonight in our combine primer, really excited about this one. I thought a lot about this and I tried to break this down. So I've got 5 segments tonight. We just did the first one. What can we change? That transitions into item number 2, and I call it film versus event. This is before the combine starts producing numbers, right before we get to the 40 times. I mentioned the jumps, the agility drills, all the graphics and the percentiles that are going to dominate over the next week or so. I think it's really important to establish the framework for how we're going to interpret all of that data, because every year the biggest mistake people make isn't reacting to the combine. It's reacting to it without deciding ahead of time what the combine is actually allowed to mean. So this is where this segment comes in. This is film versus event, because the reality is the film and the event are not equal forms of evidence. They're measuring different things. The film is measuring how a player plays football in a football environment. Chaos, with context, with responsibilities, with mistakes around him, with 21 other bodies in motion, and adjustments required in real time, right? The event this weekend is measuring what the same player is physically capable of doing in isolation. So capability obviously is useful. It sets a baseline, but it's not the same thing as application. So before that data shows up, we need to ask what's already proven on tape. So if you've watched a corner, like one of my favorites in this draft is Tacario Davis. We've watched him play hundreds of snaps, consistently stay connected in man coverage. He's going to be underdrafted. I think he's a good player. He can carry the vertical. He can squeeze on the comebacks. He contests at the catch point. We already have a functional understanding of his play speed. That's been demonstrated in an environment where the stakes and spacing matter. If he runs fast this week, that's just confirmation. If he doesn't, though, that's worth noting. But it shouldn't outweigh repeated real game evidence of how he moves when the ball is live. Same thing with wide receivers in separation. A guy like Malachi Fields from Notre Dame has created throwing windows on tape with pacing and timing against physical coverage. He's a big dude. That skill has been applied against leverage, against contact, and against disguise coverages. The straight line sprint in Indianapolis might confirm some things, but it doesn't necessarily introduce a trait we didn't already see functioning in a football context, if you will. Now, on the other hand, there are areas where the film leaves the door wide open. Maybe a linebacker is productive downhill, but is rarely asked to turn and run with backs or tight ends. That's where someone like Arvell Reese from Ohio State comes into Indy with real questions to answer. Maybe an edge rusher like David Bailey out of Texas Tech flashes power and effort, but we're trying to figure out how much of that disruption comes from true first step explosiveness versus just late rep motor. And we've seen GMs get burned year over year. Gosh, Chris Greer comes to mind, where he sees a guy who plays with effort, but he ignored the explosive numbers and just went with the motor, and that's not what it's all about at the next level. Another position that I think, another player I wanted to mention, was a safety like Emmanuel McNeil-Warren from Toledo. Big time player, kind of small time school, constantly around the football, plays near the line of scrimmage. We want a better feel for how much range he has on the back end when he's asked to play in space at the next level. These are situations where the event gives us something the film can't isolate, a look at raw movement ability without all the schematic noise. And that's where testing becomes valuable, not as a replacement for what we saw, but as an explanation for why we saw it. Does this guy make plays because he processes quickly, or because he closes ground faster than the people around him, right? Is he an IQ guy, or is he just a physical freak of nature and he was playing around lesser athletes? That's not going to happen in the NFL. Everybody in the NFL is a freak. A guy who wins late in the rep because of effort doesn't necessarily win in the NFL because he has enough twitch to recover after initially being beaten. It's bend, right? Another one that comes to mind that I wanted to talk about was an edge position like Cassius Howell. The tape shows disruption. How much of that is going to translate when the athlete across from him gets better at the next level? Or an offensive tackle like Caden Proctor, where the functional strength is obviously evident, but the question becomes how much lateral range exists when the pocket starts to move. The event can help answer these questions, but it doesn't get to rewrite the film. And this is exactly where fans are most likely to overreact next week, because we're going to see someone run faster than expected, or jump higher than expected, or move more fluidly in drills than expected. And the instinct will be to project that result backwards, to assume that it was always there and that it now overrides what we already saw from the tape on Saturday. The testing measures the ceiling of movement. The tape shows you the floor of the execution. Can I say that again? The testing, the event, measures the ceiling of that player's movement. The film, the tape, shows the floor of their execution. All right? So you can test an elite athlete and still play slow because he's late to diagnose, right? You can have average testing numbers and still play fast because you're great at anticipation. Ryan Clark comes to mind. He was a very average athlete, but he knew where to be, and he was in the spot before the ball got there. He had great anticipation. One is what your body can do in space. The other is what your brain and technique allow you to do when 21 other people are moving at the same time. So as the combine unfolds this week and the numbers start coming in, the question isn't, is this good or is this bad? The question should be reframed as, does this add context to something we weren't sure about? Because if it does, then it matters. But if it doesn't, then we already had more important answer on tape. And next week, when we do the evaluation episode on March the 3rd, this becomes invaluable, because now we've already agreed on the rules. The film sets the baseline. The event either explains it or it doesn't. Okay? So really quickly, before we move on, if you want to follow along with some of these questions as the testing numbers start to come in this week, I have put together my Combine Big Book, a Scouting Handbook covering all 319 participants. It is totally free. Just DM me the phrase Big Book on X at RufusP88, and I'll send it your way in PDF format. Okay. Segment number 3. And we're doing great. I appreciate you joining me tonight. I counted, I have at least 65 players that I mentioned in this episode. That is mostly in addition to the top 50 we did a couple of weeks ago. I wanted to focus on some guys outside of the first round for the most part. A couple of these guys I didn't mention because I have some favorites, and I think if you follow along, you'll start to see my favorites. But I am trying to be more breadth of discussion this year. I want to be able to talk about more than the top 32, more than the top 50. My idea is I'd like to get between 150 and 200. I think last year I got to 75 or 80 pretty comfortably, and I'd like to at least double that this year, if not more so. So this next item, and we're going to get fast and furious into these players, into this combine in the next segment, and I call this one sentence, one projection. And the idea here is really simple. Before anybody runs, before anybody tests, before anybody becomes a winner or a loser at the combine, I want to establish what these players are actually trying to be at the next level. And more importantly, what specific piece of testing might help answer that question this week. Because next week, when the numbers come in, and we're not deciding who moved up or moved down, we're asking whether the combine gave us information that supports or contradicts that role. So I figured let's start tonight, and we'll plant a few flags. And I'm going to go through the position groups. All right, start with quarterback. Garrett Musmeyer, heard me talk about him, quarterback from LSU. He needs to show that his athletic profile supports an on-schedule, timing-based starting quarterback. Going to have to watch his throwing session for consistency in his base and ball placement on intermediate routes. Okay, one sentence, one projection. Next player is Sawyer Robertson from Baylor, another quarterback, another one of my favorites coming in. We're looking for movement skills that align with a developmental QB2. His 3-cone and rollout throws should be testing. Another quarterback, Taylon Green from Arkansas. Benefits of his movement testing matches a designed movement starter profile. I think the 10-yard split and the short shuttle for him will matter this week. And finally, at quarterback, Diego Pavia from Vanderbilt needs baseline athleticism for backup viability. Watch for clean footwork and operation during the drills. He just can't be late. He's got to be better than he was at the Senior Bowl. At running back, Katron Allen from Penn State would like testing that supports a volume early down roll. His 10-yard split is going to be key in the 40-yard dash. We know he can power through the hole. How quickly does he get up to speed? Is he an NFL caliber running back? Demond Claiborne out of Wake Forest has a chance to answer pass game usage questions. Watch him in the gauntlet and route running drills. He'll be a real nice third down option in this draft class. Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame, RB2 on that team. Can he clarify change of pace viability? His vertical jump may indicate a burst that we saw on the film. Now he's got to verify it. Mike Washington Jr., love this running back out of Arkansas, looking to stabilize a committee running back projection. His short shuttle is going to be important this week. Rounding out the running back room, I want to talk about Seth McGowan, running back from Kentucky. We're going to need some confirmation for him to be a depth player. Watch him in pass protection technique in the drills this week. Moving on along to wide receiver, a personal favorite, Omar Cooper from Indiana. He can align with a slot chain mover role this week. His 3-cone drill is going to be huge for him. Harrison Wallace III from Ole Miss would benefit from numbers supporting a wide receiver 3 projection. His short shuttle is what I'm watching. Brennan Thompson from Mississippi State has an opportunity to reinforce vertical ability this week. All eyes are going to be on his 40-yard dash. He's my pick for the fastest 40 at Indy. Chris Brazzell II out of Tennessee can answer boundary receiver questions this week. Watch his release work in position drills. We want him to be an X-receiver. Ted Hurst from Georgia State. I've said his name a few times. He may support a situational big slot role at the next level. Change of direction drills will be big for him this week. And finally, Zachariah Branch from Georgia needs to show traits that translate to sub-package usage. Watch the gauntlet for him for catch consistency. At tight end, Max Clare from Ohio State is aiming for athletic testing markers consistent with an inline tight end 2 role. His bench press is going to matter. Can he hold up in the run game? Sam Roush from Stanford can strengthen his blocking tight end projection. Look for play strength in his tight end blocking drills. Oscar Delp from Georgia may benefit from movement testing. His short shuttle will be key. He's going to be an interesting character this week. I've heard that he's just an A1 elite athlete, just didn't really get an opportunity to showcase that at Georgia. He's one to watch. Justin Joly from North Carolina State can align with a red zone receiving tight end 2 projection. Watch the contested catch drills, especially in the red zone. And finally, Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon, the presumptive TE1 in this class. He needs to show his flexibility testing that supports his mismatch usage projection. His 3-cone drill is going to be super important this week. His should be an eye-popping number. Along the offensive line, Evan Bernstein from Northwestern is looking to match a reserve interior player role. Bench press reps are going to help his case this week. He's got center guard flexibility. Is he an NFL caliber? Basically body type. Can he hold up strength-wise? Francis Mauigoa is a name to watch. Projected top 10 pick out of Miami. Would like to keep his projection at tackle. His short shuttle is going to be huge this week. I think he makes it. He was kind of like Kelvin Banks, where it's going to be maybe he's a tackle, but at worst case he's an all-pro guard. Speaking of guards, Logan Jones from Iowa can stabilize a starting center guard projection. Watch his snap-to-step timing in offensive line drills. Connor Lew from Auburn is a name I keep hearing. He's aiming to fit a rotational guard role. Lateral movement drills will matter for him this week. Bo Stevens out of Iowa may align as a swing interior option. Watch his ability to redirect this week. And finally, Logan Taylor out of Boston College needs movement traits that support tackle depth. His short shuttle is another one that we're going to keep an eye on at that tackle position. Let's go to the other side of the ball. On the defensive line, Bryson Eason from Tennessee is working toward a base down role. Watch him anchor strength in drills. Denai Dennis Sutton from Penn State can support a rotational pass rush projection. His 10-yard split in the 40 is going to matter. Can he really get off, or is he more just a run defensive end? Romello Height from Texas Tech, overage player, but he may benefit as a situational edge. His 3-cone drill will tell us something about his top-end athletic ability. And a really interesting name this weekend is going to be Akeem Mesidor, the defensive end from Miami. Needs straights that align with an every down roll. His vertical jump is going to be huge this week. We want to see how explosive he actually is. And finally, Gary Smith III from UCLA is going to be one of these premier depth usage guys. Watch his bursts and initial steps in the 3-cone, the shuttle, and the 10-yard 10-yard drill on the 40. What is it called? 10-yard split. Lost the word. Let's see. We just did defensive line. Let's move to linebacker. One of the most popular names outside the first round is going to be Bryce Betcher from Oregon. He's going to answer questions whether he can play in space. His short shuttle will be key. Scooby Williams from Texas A&M, one of my guys, is looking to support a downhill roll. Watch his change of direction testing, like the 3-cone drill. Jacob Rodriguez, very popular player from Texas Tech, may clarify passing down viability. Watch him in coverage drills this week. Red Murdoch from the University of Buffalo can align with some depth will linebacker usage. We're going to see what kind of athlete he is in the 3-cone drill. That's especially helpful for that backside backer. And finally, Kyle Lewis. You're going to hear me say his name a lot. He's outside of most people's top 80. He is inside my top 50. He's at 50. Linebacker out of Pittsburgh. He's going to aim for sub-package snaps. But again, he's another guy that I'm looking at the short shuttle, his 10-yard split, just to let teams know exactly how athletic he is. I think he's going to test really well this week. And finally, let's finish up in the secondary. Jadon Kennedy from Oregon. He's going to be a slot player. At least that's what he projects to. We're going to look at his short shuttle. Can he move inside out? Bud Clark from TCU is looking to align with a split field safety or nickel projection. Watch his short shuttle and his 3-cone drill. Keontae Scott from Miami can clarify whether he has outside viability. His 40-yard dash will be huge this week. One of the more consequential 40-yard dashes of the combine. Chandler Rivers of Duke is aiming for nickel contribution at the next level. Watch his short shuttle and 3-cone drill. And finally, Lewis Moore out of Indiana is looking to fit depth safety usage. Watch his fluidity in position work. Played great for the Hoosiers en route to their national championship this year. Let's see what kind of athlete he is and if he can really sustain that at the next level. So again, none of this is about rankings. I'm just naming some guys that I like. This is about what these players are trying to be, and these are the tests that might help to answer whether their athletic profile supports it. Next segment I call questions I actually care about in Indy. So this segment is a little bit different than the last one because the Combine has a way of flattening everything into a leaderboard. Fastest 40, highest vertical, most bench press reps, so on and so forth. That's useful, but that's not really how football works, right? So these are the questions I care about and some more players I wanted to talk about. At quarterback, I'm watching whether the feet and the eyes are working together when Luke Altmaier from Illinois resets during his rollout throws. Does his base stay underneath him, or does everything get tall and the passes drift a bit? When Ty Simpson from Alabama, who's going to throw this week, has to hitch and rethrow in rhythm during the scripted throwing section, does the ball still come out on time, or does the timing break down once his first read is off schedule? That matters to me more than arm strength on air. At running back, I'm watching deceleration. When Nick Singleton from Penn State hits the bag in position drills, does he gear down before contact, or does he stay under control through it? Does Roman Hemby from Indiana sink his hips naturally when he has to redirect, or does everything turn into a gather step? Because the difference between burst and balance usually shows up when you have to stop before you go. At wide receiver, I'm interested in whether speed survives the change of direction, especially in the bigger receivers. When Antonio Williams from Clemson works through his break points and drills, does he maintain stride efficiency, or does everything get choppy at the top of the route? Does Jacoby Lane from USC come out of the cut with momentum, or does the route reset after the plant? That's the difference really between being open and looking open on tape. Remember, everybody at the next level is a better athlete. At tight end, I want to see how comfortable these guys are moving in space without a runway. Not a great tight end group this year. So I'm looking for specific things, like when Eli Raridan from Notre Dame works through lateral movement drills, does he look like someone who can detach from the formation and adjust mid-route? How about 6'7" Tanner Colziel from Houston? Does he stay coordinated enough when he has to change direction on the move, or does the length start working against him? Does he start looking awkward? Along the offensive line, I'm watching recovery. Like when Caden Proctor from Alabama loses the initial hand fight in mirror drills, does he anchor and reset, or does the rep end right there? Does Spencer Fano from Utah maintain posture when he has to redirect his feet, or does everything start to lean forward once the movement begins and he starts to reach? Because NFL pass rushers don't stop just after the first move. How about on the other side of the ball? On the defensive line, I'm looking at how quickly power shows up. Like when Peter Woods from Clemson fires off the line in drill work, is there immediate displacement, or does it take a second step to generate force? I was in a coaching clinic with Greg Williams, G-R-E-G-G Williams, the famously head of Bounty Gate from the New Orleans Saints. And what he called that was vertical knockback. Look at the defensive line, look at the offensive lineman trying to guard him. Is there vertical knockback? At the snap of the ball, who moves backwards? And how long does it take? How about another Clemson guy, TJ Parker? Maintain pad level through contact, or does the first movement out of his stance bring him upright too quickly? Great athlete, inconsistent. Let's see what he does at the Combine. At linebacker, I'm watching transitions this week, like when Harold Perkins Jr. out of LSU is asked to open and carry in space. Does he turn cleanly, or does his stride shorten? How about Sonny Styles from Ohio State, who's going to be an absolute monster this year? I don't think he's going to put up Nick Emanwari numbers, but he's going to test just insane. He's going to be the eye popper from this combine, I feel. Does he gather before planting when he breaks downhill? I anticipate he does it. I can't wait to watch this. Or is this going to be one smooth movement from trigger to tackle? And I think he's going to be great. But this is what I'm watching for. This is, does he go top 5 or does he go top 10, right? In the secondary, I care a lot about patience. I'm going to go to my guy, Takario Davis from Washington again. Watch him flip his hips in position drills. Does he stay square before committing, or does he open early and then have to recover? How about another Ohio State guy, Davison Igbino's son? Does he stay balanced through the turn, or does the upper body start to take over when he has to transition vertically? So when the numbers start rolling in this week and we're talking about who helped themselves and who didn't, this is the checklist I'm coming back to, not the leaderboard. These are the questions I want answered. And finally, we're running just over 30 minutes, and I appreciate you staying with me. A few more names I wanted to talk about. The last section, and I tried to fit, I'll put it this way. The cutting room floor for this episode, because I had 2 weeks to put this together. I'm sorry I missed you last week. I had my son. And I was with him for the first couple of days, and I just didn't really have the time that I felt like I needed to put into writing an episode. Plus he wasn't going to stay still for 45 minutes silent anyway, like when I needed him to. So, and this show has a 7 o'clock. It has to be on at 7. So I have to, if I can't record it ahead of time, I got to do it live. So I wanted to spend some time with him. I wanted to put everything I had into this. A lot of ideas on the cutting room floor, a lot of sentences and thoughts and observations that I tried to fit in to a 3,500 word script. And a concept that I was trying to work on was what I ended up calling this last segment that I decided to not cut because it's really important. This is called the Boring Combine All-Stars. These are guys who I wanted to talk about because best case scenario this week, nobody talks about them. You don't want to hear their name on NFL Network. You don't want the slow motion replay of their vertical jump or their 40-yard dash. I don't want to hear Rich Eisen saying, keep an eye on this guy, because if everything goes the way it's supposed to for these guys, they're going to leave Indianapolis looking exactly the same as they did when they walked in, which is solid, sound football players with quiet value. This is where I wanted to get into some of the players that I really like that may not be getting the top end recognition that are going to help on day 2. Drew Shelton, the tackle from Penn State along the offensive line. If he moves this week the way he's expected to in the mirror drills and the short shuttle comes back fine, then nothing changes on him. He's still a developmental, dependable tackle prospect. And I think for late day 2, that's a win. At linebacker, Anthony Hill Jr. from Texas, one of my favorites, is another one. If the movement testing looks clean and the coverage drills don't expose anything really, really bad and unexpected, then he's still the same downhill, assignment sound, second level defender that he showed on tape. And he's a day 1 starter drafted on day 2. Another guy I like a lot, that the wide receiver class this year is ridiculous, and I haven't even really... I got into a top 50, and I kind of ranked the guys who were in there. The top 100 is ridiculous. There's 10, there might be 15 in the top 100. But at wide receiver, I think Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama probably doesn't need a headline performance this week. If the routes and the position drills look crisp like they did on tape, if the gauntlet is uneventful, then he's still projecting as a reliable receiver 3 in this deep class. You can get a starting receiver on day 2 and not have to trade up for him, I don't think. I think Jeremy Bernard's like my wide receiver 9, wide receiver 10. On the defensive line, Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech. This is the kind of interior player where a normal week is a good week. He had a great Senior Bowl week in Mobile. He's just got to show the adequate get off, show that he can move laterally in the drills, and he's done his job. He might sneak into day one, but I think he's a solid day two guy. Just don't screw anything up. And finally, in the secondary, I like a guy like Colton Hood, the other Tennessee cornerback, not Jermod McCoy, who's going to go top 12. He doesn't need to win the combine. He just needs to avoid raising new questions about his transitions or his long speed. So once again, I don't think these players are trying to become something new this week. I think they're trying to confirm what the tape already suggested, that they can fill a role without being a liability. No surprises, no red flags, no new questions. And if that's the story coming out of Indy, well, that's how starters get drafted on day 2 and potentially early day 3 while everyone else is chasing upside. So that's it. That's the checklist heading into Indy, the roles, the questions, and the traits we're actually trying to clarify this week. And again, if you want to follow along a little bit more closely, and if you'd like a copy of the Combine Big Book, a Scouting Handbook covering all 319 participants, just DM me the phrase Big Book and I'll send it over. It is totally free. I thank you for joining. Be sure to follow along on YouTube, Spotify, and across all the social media for updates throughout the week. And again, if you can find me on X at RufusP88. If you'd like to support the show directly, I do have TDP merch available, including our white logo hoodies. You can click the link in the show description to check those out and help support what we're building here. That's it for me tonight. I'm Paul Adamczak. This has been the Draft Podcast presented by the Gem City Sports Podcast Network. We'll be back next week to see who answered these questions and who made things work.